Hold up, don't close this out. I already know what you're thinking. That story's done, I got it. Nah, it's not done. It actually just got started. Because last time, I told you something, and I left it hanging. On purpose. I told you Maromro wasn't in that bar by accident, but I never told you why he was there. Nobody ever has. East Kingston, Jamaica. A small hospital room. White walls. The flat beeping of medical machines. And in the bed, an old man. Dying. He'd been carrying a secret for 30 years. 30 years. Hadn't told a single soul. Couldn't. But that day, his last day, the door opened. And the man who walked in was exactly who he'd been waiting for. How did he know who was coming? That answer, that right there, is the darkest, deepest, most unexpected part of this whole story. And it takes us all the way back to 1963. That night, that bar, that table. But this time, through Maromro's eyes. My name is Scar, and this is what really happened that night. Kingston, Jamaica. An old man is lying in a hospital bed. Nobody around him, no family, no visitors. Just white walls, the steady hum of machines, and pale afternoon light bleeding through the window. His name was Vernon Dale. You've never heard that name before. That's okay, because Vernon Dale never stepped on a stage, never held a microphone, never owned a record label. But back in 1963, in that studio, he was standing right next to that desk. He was the one who wrote that note. No voice, no future, waste of time. And now, 27 years later, he was dying. The nurse had come and gone that morning. Someone else had stopped by in the afternoon, dropped off his medication, made a note, left. Vernon was alone again. The door swung open, quiet, slow. Vernon didn't turn his head. He already knew who it was. How? Don't ask me that. Some things don't have an explanation. The man walked in, pulled a chair close, sat down. Old. Hard to say exactly how old. His face had time in it, but not weight. And his eyes, still those same eyes, calm, deep. Like someone who'd seen everything and stopped being surprised by any of it. Maromro. 27 years had passed. Felt like yesterday. Vernon tried to speak. His mouth opened. Nothing came out at first. His throat locked up on him. Maromro didn't rush him, just sat there. Finally, Vernon said, "You know why I gave him that note?" Maromro said nothing. "Because somebody told me to." Car steps in. "Wait, stop right there. When I first heard this, I froze. Somebody told me to. Who told him? Why? And why did Vernon, that young, neatly dressed assistant, actually go through with it? To understand that, we gotta go back. Further back than 1963. A lot further. Because this story didn't start in that studio. Kingston's music scene was boiling over by the late 1950s. Ska was rising, the rhythm was shifting, and right in the middle of all of it, there were a few names that made everything else possible. Vernon Dale, back then, was just a young accountant. Music wasn't his world directly, but his work kept pulling him into those circles. Invoices, contracts, small accounts. Kingston's record scene was tight. Everybody knew everybody. And somewhere in that world, Vernon met a man. I'm not giving you his name yet. Not right now. Let's call him Mr. G. Mr. G was one of the most powerful music investors on the island. Not publicly, never publicly. But behind the scenes, behind the curtain, he had a hand in every major decision, somehow. Vernon did small work for Mr. G. Clean stuff, legal things, at least at the start. Early 1963. Mr. G called Vernon in. They didn't meet at an office. It was a small fish restaurant on the east side of Kingston, close to the water. Midday. Loud. Crowded enough that nobody could hear anybody else. Mr. G was already at the table when Vernon got there. No food in front of him, just a glass of water. "Sit," he said. Vernon sat. "You're going to start working at Beverly's Records," Mr. G said, "as an assistant in Leslie's office." Vernon waited. There was more coming. And, Mr. G continued, from time to time, I'm going to need certain things from you. Small things. Harmless. What kind of things? Vernon asked. Mr. G picked up his glass, took a slow sip, set it back down. Sometimes a name, sometimes a decision. Sometimes, he paused, a piece of paper. Vernon didn't fully understand what that meant in that moment, but he said yes. Scar steps in. Now y'all are going to ask, why did he say yes? Simple. Money. Fear. And in Kingston back then, fighting against those two things combined was nearly impossible. Vernon's mother was sick. Treatment cost money. Mr. G knew that. Of course he knew. And Vernon, young, alone, scared Vernon, couldn't see another way out. But here's where it gets real interesting. Because why did Mr. G want to stop Bob Marley in the first place? Mr. G's system was simple. He wanted to control Kingston's music scene, decide which voices rose, which names broke through, who got into a studio and who didn't. This wasn't new. There had always been people like that. People who didn't care about the art, just about the money and the power that swirled around it. Bob Marley at that point was nobody. 18 years old, broke, unknown. But Mr. G had seen something in him. Not a threat exactly. Something worse than that. Potential. And when Mr. G saw potential in someone, he did one of two things. He either bought them early, or he broke them early. Bob couldn't be bought. Mr. G had figured that out within seconds of laying eyes on him. So he tried to break him instead. Vernon closed his eyes in that hospital bed. I saw his face, he said, voice barely above a whisper. When he took the paper, I looked right at him. Maromro stayed quiet. I felt it the second I handed it over, but it was too late. Long silence. I wanted to apologize for years, but how was I supposed to find him? He became who he became. Who was I to even... His voice broke. That's when Maromro finally spoke. First time all day. His voice was the same, exactly the same, like the years hadn't touched it. That note didn't break him, Vernon. Vernon looked at him. That note made him. Let me take you back to 1963 now. That night. That bar. When Bob walked through that door, Maromro was already sitting there. But why? Maromro knew Vernon. He knew Mr. G, too. Kingston was small. In that world, everybody knew everybody. And Maromro had been watching Mr. G's system for years, quietly, from the shadows. He knew what was going to happen in that studio that day. Knew the note was coming. Knew Bob would be turned away. And he knew if that young man spent that night alone, he might break by morning. Not just hurt, not just knocked down. Broken. For real. The kind you don't come back from. That's why he was there. He was waiting. Now let me tell you what I know about Maromro. But first, I'm not telling you everything, not yet, because Maromro's story runs deeper than Bob's story. And cracking it open too fast, like ripping open a gift, that wouldn't do it justice. Here's what I know. Maromro wasn't born in Kingston. Where he was born, I'm not going there right now. That's another night's story. But I can tell you this. He had lost a musician once, someone he cared about deeply. Lost them while they still had everything left to give. After that loss, he made a decision. He wasn't going to let that happen again. Not if he could help it. Not to anyone. That decision is what brought him to that bar. That decision is what put him across the table from Bob. And that decision, years down the road, lit the fuse on something that would change the world forever. Back to that night. The bar, dim light, ska bleeding through the radio. Maromro and Bob sitting across from each other. When Bob put that note on the table, Maromro read it, and something moved through him. Anger? Not quite. Recognition. He'd seen this before. Not the same note, but the same system, the same hand behind it. And that same hand had taken someone from him years before. Now, Maromro said something to Bob that night. I told you that last time, but I left something out. Right as Bob was getting up to leave, Maromro leaned in and whispered 2 words. Just 2 words. Bob never forgot them. I can't tell you what those 2 words were right now, because those 2 words are sitting right at the center of everything that's coming. Bob went to the beach the next morning. You already know that. But do you know what he did after he came back? He didn't go home. He went straight back to where Maromro had been. But Maromro wasn't there. The bar was closed, empty. Not even the bartender. Bob knocked, waited. Nobody came. He turned around, walked away. And for weeks after that, Maromro was gone. Bob kept going to the beach, kept playing, but Maromro wasn't there anymore. Where had he gone? 3 weeks later, Bob noticed something. He'd never asked anyone about Maromro, never told anyone about that night. It was like a dream, real but untouchable. One evening, he asked an old acquaintance, careful, no details. That older man who used to sit in the corner of that bar, you know him? The guy stopped. Which corner? Bob described it. The man thought about it, then slowly shook his head. Nobody sits in that corner. That table's been empty for years. Owner put a chair there, but nobody ever uses it. Bob went still. What do you mean nobody sits there? I don't know, man. Just nobody goes near it. People avoid it. Silence. Why are you asking? The man said. Bob didn't answer. He turned around and walked away. I gotta be real with you for a second. When I got to this part of the story, when I was putting all the pieces together, I started asking questions I didn't have answers for. Was Maromro real? Was Vernon's confession real? Was Mr. G, that shadow in the background, was any of it real? Some of those questions I could answer, some I couldn't. But here's what I know for certain. Bob Marley, later in his life, talked about that night to very few people. That bar, that man. He never gave a name. But one time, he said this. There was a man that night. He saw me, really saw me. Saw something in me that nobody else could see. And that was it. He never said another word about it. The hospital room, 1990. Vernon opened his eyes. Maromro was still there. I need to ask you something, Vernon said. Maromro waited. That boy, Bob, did he know you? Did he really know who you were? Maromro thought about it for a moment. Then slowly he smiled. No, he said, he didn't. But did you know him? Long silence. I knew him, Maromro said quietly, before he was even born. Vernon's eyes filled. How is that even possible? Maromro stood up, pushed the chair back, walked toward the door. He stopped, turned back one last time. Vernon, he said, some things don't have to be possible. They just have to be real. And he walked out. Vernon passed away that night, but when he went, for the first time in years, he was at peace. Scar's voice cools back down, controlled, but something underneath it is still trembling. So now I'm asking you the most important question of this whole story. Maromro said he knew Bob before he was even born. What does that mean? Coincidence? A metaphor? Or something else? Something literal that we're not ready to explain yet? That's where the next story takes us. But before we get there, remember what I told you. Maromro lost someone, a musician he loved, and that loss is connected to Bob Marley's life in ways that go so much deeper than you're thinking right now. And Mr. G? Mr. G is still out there, still watching, still planning his next move. This story hasn't ended. It's just gone somewhere deeper. And you, yeah, you, right here, you're coming with me. A white hospital room, a dying man's confession. And 27 years before that, a bar in Kingston. 2 words. You don't know those 2 words yet, but you will.